This conference will now be recorded.
Uh, the way that we're going to run this today is I'm going to turn the meeting over to the town administrator, Bill Shanahan. Bill Shanahan is going to talk with the peer people, the people that are involved in the construction of it, and he's going to ask the critical questions that have come up over the last week or so, and get answers to things. I'm asking that council wait until the end of Mr. Shanahan's presentation, and then council will be able to ask questions at that time. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Shanahan.
Thank you, sir. I guess I'm close enough to the microphone. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and I got to put these down so I can see y'all. Um, I'm going to start this thing off by having everyone at this table to introduce themselves and tell us who you are, what company you represent. And so we'll start over there with you, John, if you don't mind. Just follow it around.
John O'Brien, Consensus Construction.
Matt Whitley, Consensus Construction.
John Doherty, Consensus Construction.
They're actually the ones that are out there building the pier.
Jim Britton, LMG. Kelly Clayton, LMG.
You guys need to pull that microphone a little bit closer to you. LNG is actually our analyst, and they're just helping us out, making sure processes are moving and documentation and stuff like that's being done correctly. Gentlemen.
Eric Beach, Collins Engineers.
Daniel Campbell, Collins Engineers.
Troy Rame, LS3P Associates.
Okay, so this is the team that's making the pair happen. And as you'll notice, nowhere did we say project manager, and that's because this team doesn't have a project manager. It basically has me taking advice off all of these folks to do it, and that's not this current council. This current council allowed us to bring on the analyst, but when we wanted a project manager, it never happened. So it's being done a little bit differently than most projects of this size, but wanted you to know up front that this is how this format is set up. The goal of today's workshop is to identify where we're at in the project, understand where we're at, when it ends, what it's supposed to look like, and how we're going to get there. And I think the how we're going to get there is probably the most important for us at this time. And when we do the how we're going to get there, we also would like to identify any issues that might stop the project, might slow down the process, and figure out here, what we have to do to eliminate or bypass, work around those issues so we can get this thing done and get all of you on the process, on the pier. And so that's what the goal is today. I've heard some rumors and propaganda that, everyone's mad at each other. Nobody's mad at anybody. I mean, this is a $17 million project, and things happen in a $17 million project or $18 million project, and that's why we're here. So I'm going to start this off, and basically all I'm going to do is going to ask some questions and give my experts the opportunity to discuss those questions and see where we end up. But the first one is construction schedules. When do we actually expect the pier to be completed? And so anyone who would like to jump in. So John smile.
So with our pay application, we submitted an updated schedule, two different schedules. So that's kind of a complex question, because there are part of what we're doing today is there's some things that we got to get directions and answers and things of that nature, which impact the schedule. So what we do is when you sign a lump sum contract, there's a construction duration, you do a CPM schedule. So the CPM schedule is affected by order of materials, changes, things of that nature. So what we do is we submit two schedules. So we do what's called an impact schedule. So based on the contract, when something happens, the CPM is taken out. And then what we do is we do an accelerated or a working schedule to try to get it done sooner. So for all, just in a layman, summary, it's projected somewhere around the end of the year.
Yeah, before you jump in, I know we had some documentation and it said it was substantial completion date 15 December, and then the other one was the February 15th of 2023. And but you said impact the schedule, and that's good lead into my second question. The second question is, oh, does anyone else have anything to say about what John just said? I'm sorry. Going once, going twice, going to the second schedule. What you said impact the schedule, issues on the schedule. So what are issues that we have to worry about that are currently delaying the schedule or could possibly delay the schedule in the future?
You want to go over? You want to go over that, or you want me to go over it?
Yeah.
The most critical right now is obviously the siding. One of the important milestones to the project is obviously getting the building dried in. To do that, we had a pre-con meeting last week. We still need that final direction on those modifications that were requested. Hopefully we can get all of that resolved because that's affecting drying in the entire building. It's not just the walls that affects the roof as well. We did make we had some conversations about adjusting the trim depth last week, which will affect the length of the metal panels for the metal roof. But once we actually get started installing the siding, we can start trying to get this building dried in.
And just to add to that a little bit, the positive thing is we had manufacturing issues with the siding. We made a decision. There was a selection made. The siding is here. It's here from the manufacturer. It's sitting at the supplier. So we have the siding. Mm-hmm. So with the magnitude of the project, the architect and design team are just trying to tweak a few things to make it exactly the way they want. So it's just a nature of the beast, So the siding is here. As soon as we decide on a certain trim piece, then we can go ahead and put the siding up. Yeah. So that's the positive thing. That it's manufactured, it's not delayed. It's sitting at the supplier, but you have to start with the trim piece.
Gotcha. Anybody else?
I'll speak real quickly about what he's talking with the trim piece. The siding product that was selected is primarily a residential product, and the longevity of the product is good and more extensive than most products as far as the labor that you'll have to put into to maintain it. But it is primarily a residential product. So when the submittal came through, as they were ordering material, the corner trims on the building were much smaller than what had previously been designed. And this building, kind of as its monumental size and elevation, sits and gains that stature of a monumental building. Excuse me. So we were trying to just work with consensus last week to modify the trim to more closely fit the original intent of the project. And the trim was also recessed in from the siding slightly, so we're doing a little modification to make that come back out above the siding as a true building would be, or a normal building would be constructed.
Okay. Anybody else? I guess when you say drying of the building, can you explain what you mean by that, just for our citizens?
Right now, there's just weather barrier on both the roof and walls. You got weather barrier on the walls and a high temp underlayment on the roof. So it's partially dried in, but the building is not going to be dried in until you actually get the actual final product on the building, meaning the metal roofing and the siding. And then we're working through the storefront as well. So we got the return submittal for the storefront. So those are the three main components to get the actual building dried in.
Okay, and I'm going to go off my script, but I've had several people say without having the siding on there for the amount of time we haven't had the siding, that there's a possibility that we're doing damage to the buildings because they're not covered. Is that an accurate statement, or rusty nails and screws and stuff like that?
Yeah, as soon as we got all the sheathing on the building and was able to get our inspections, we were there covering covering it up as quick as possible. The weather barrier, there was a delay with getting the requested weather barrier on the project. But as soon as that material came in, we were there the next day or the day after that getting it installed. So some of the plywood was exposed for a little bit, but as soon as we could get it covered up, we got it covered up. And there was a few boards that was requested by the design team to be replaced, and we did replace those.
But no rust. I know there's some superficial that you have to clean, but that happens with any of those projects. I understand that.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what Matt said. So there were some sheathing panels that had exhibited some bowing from being exposed, but consensus and the design team worked together to do inspections, determine which ones needed to be replaced, and those panels were replaced prior to putting the building wrap on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so the building wrap, so you have your wall building wrap and you have your roof membrane. Both of those products are within a duration of what they can be exposed. They're also, they're superior products that typically you see on a residential building. So
This is good. A lot of, well, just for our citizens, I know our council know this. We have a weekly meeting with all of these folks and probably a couple of other, because they all have their own experts that they bring in with them. Not saying that y'all aren't experts. And some of the things that we've discussed as pending construction issues, I'm just gonna list them off and just tell us where we're at with them, because these are some of the things you hear folks talking about. Number one, the interior handrails.
I'll speak there. The interior handrails, the finishes has been approved. Outside of that, there shouldn't really be much outstanding.
Okay, I'm saying that there's an RFI 110 that's still open. Is that finished then? That's closed up?
It's not closed up, but there's a question on the material of it, but it should be in the specs, and we'll get that addressed.
Cool. Easier than I expected. How about the lighted handrails? I heard that's there was a credit for it, and we're going back to the way it was originally, or what is the issue with the lighted handrails?
Initially in the project, the monumental stair and the ramp had handrails that were lit internally. As one of the VEs that was selections that was removed. So it's gone back and forth through the contractor, and then ultimately the design team has taken that baton to try to create a resolution that fits with both the town needs and the design needs. So we have been working with the supplier for a lighting manufacturer and have almost come to the final design and how to initiate that into the project. So we've kind of taken that baton and on our own accord and are coming to the end of what that resolution will be.
Anybody else? Yes. The corner handrail posts, there was some confusion on how to mount them. Has that been addressed? Change request 36, material increase, delays in making decision.
Well, there were some outstanding questions that the design team had about that change request, and in yesterday's minutes, Intercoastal Marine said that they were gonna. I guess the engineer was on vacation the previous week when the question was asked, so he wasn't able to get the information that we had requested for backup. So he's going to reach out to them this week.
And just to clarify, that's not just the corner post. That's all of the posts that go out on the pier.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as mounting, there's no question right now about how to mount them. That's been determined. It's more so just about effort that went into getting that finalized.
Correct. The question about the corner handrail post was the mounting location of the actual light fixture that beacons out for boats on the water. So there's some back and forth about the mounting location of that light fixture, but that's been resolved.
Got it. Issues with the surf diner. Where are we at with the surf diner and moving forward? I guess the big question on that is that something critical that's going to stop progress with the pier?
So, so everything, so yes, that is something that we just have to deal with. So there's nothing major that affects the prime contract, but in magnitude. But there are little things that do have impacts of cost and time. Like for instance, on a typical project, you may already have the tenants worked out. So your shell construction would have a lot of the design to accommodate what the future tenants are. On this particular project, the public needs to know that the particular project is a shell. So there's an active, process going on with getting leases and determining who the tenants are. So for instance, if you put an ice cream shop in there, it might be different than, a retail store, which would be different than something else. So what we're doing is making accommodations in the base contract to make it easier on the tenant. So that change is all worked out. We're waiting for one final price from the pre-engineered metal building company. So it's very minor stuff, but let me explain it in plain English. The buildings are up. The openings are engineered. They're framed. The openings are going to change.
Yeah.
So it's not a major change. It's not a major financial change, but it goes to their engineer. He has to design it. Then it has to be done. What does that mean? You can't put the windows in. So the windows are sitting at the plant. So there's little things like that we just have to handle. But they do impact time. I mean, and the thing is there's two approaches. We could just go ahead and build it up and then kick that can down the road and then tear it all out later, which would not be the best thing for the community, or we can deal with it, make the revisions, and just understand there's a time and a cost impact.
And just so our citizens know, and I'll let you jump in. I saw that. Any changes that increase the cost because of things they want goes to them. The town is not going to be paying bills that belong to somebody else. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just add to John's point that Consensus has the direction that the Surf Diner has given. And so they're in the process of pricing it out. And you mentioned one subcontractor that is trailing on getting them the price. But they have the information as far as to make, they're assembling the pricing to then be presented for those changes and reviewed by the Surf Diner.
Right. We have everything assembled. We have everything priced by all the vendors. We're waiting for, like I said, the building manufacturer, which it makes it tricky because it's a pre-engineered system. So it's not just like it's proprietary. So their engineer has to give a price and how much time to modify these openings. You don't want to hire somebody else. So what we've talked about is if we don't get that information back to them today, we'll put in some kind of allowance and present it until we get the hard number, just so everybody can start looking at it and make decisions.
And then the other, again, I got a list of things I'm just going to bring up. We're talking about a shade structure. I know we took out the original one that went all the way down, and basically just for us, all we're doing is looking at if we were to put up a small something that looks pretty that sets off the pier at the front, what would that cost? It's not guaranteed it's going to happen yet. That information has to come back to the town, and we have to look at it. But I mean, doesn't hurt to look at something.
Bill, I just want to add real quick. So yeah, so basically the original shade structure, when you walked up the stairs, you'd be at the top of the pier, you'd be looking toward the ocean. For, I'd say about 3/4 of that length, there was a shade structure that kind of covered the walkway and kind of presented you out to the ocean. So that was removed as part of the VE value engineering part of this project. So what we asked consensus to do was, hey, why don't you look at it as if you left the front part of the top of the stairs and you left the end of it, just took the center portion of it out. How much would that cost? And I believe you guys gave us a price a couple days ago. So
Yes.
yeah, the town has to review that and make a determination if that's going to be added back into the project.
Correct. There's two different prices, one for the east end and then one for the west end. There's two separate locations that y'all requested pricing on.
And just for our citizens, those type of decisions, those would go back to the council because it's kind of changing. If it was something that was a part of the plan, then I would have that authority. But if we're changing something, they need to be a part of that process, just so you know how it works. We don't want you or the council surprised by any of that. And then the ADA ramp column, can someone give us an update on that? Change Directive 3.
That's completed.
Yeah, we were issued a change directive. We submitted a change request and then that got changed over to a change directive. We got the answer to the location and that work is complete. The
Cool.
ADA ramp is 100% complete.
That's good. And we've talked about siding. And then another thing that I've heard is delay notices submitted that they're not getting addressed or haven't been addressed completely. But you guys are on top of that. We're moving forward, correct?
Well, yes. I mean, there are a couple of a handful of delay notices that have been issued. We have responded to almost all of them. I don't know how much you want me to go into the delay notices, but yes, the design team is responding to each of those individually.
Yeah. I think the question is there anything out there that's stopping the process? I'm more interested in that than actually the detail of each of them. And so.
Well, I wanted to touch on that, and it's not, when you say delay notices, we want to clarify, it's not an adversarial situation. It's required by the contract. And what you just discussed, just for the design team's perspective, is that's not a typical process. So you have to understand, we want to do these approvals that go to goes to the design team, then the owner, and then the council. The contract, that's outside of a typical contract. So that is some kind of approval that we want as a town, as a project. But if that process takes 60 days or 30 days or 90 days, we just have to live with it. But you got to understand that that's outside of the contract duration for approvals. So, I mean, it's just something we all have to just live with.
And I was actually asked a question last night that I didn't know the answer to. So I'm going to ask you all. And I don't know, did you all watch the council meeting last night? Because I know you all weren't here, but my finance director gave this presentation and she financed where we are. She talked about the pier. And one of the statements that she made, I think it was, you said that we have paid out about 75% of the monies that we have budgeted for this. And does that mean that 75% of the pier is done? I was asked that question in the construction. I didn't know what the answer was to that. So and I know a lot of people forget a big part of that is plans and engineering stuff and underground stuff. The biggest costs are not always building it, but can someone help me with that? Because I didn't know what to tell them.
I'm not sure about
Well,
the budget, but
I mean, I would say they have to acquire the materials as well.
Yeah.
So they may have ordered a bunch of material that is either on site or on the way. But just because it possibly says we paid out 75%, I mean, that's more so with the material also that's on the way to the project.
Gotcha. And again, I didn't know the answer to the question, and I figured I got you all here. I may as well do it.
Well, and I'll add, if that's the budget for the entire scope of the town's work, then that would include design fees, all the way back to the very beginning, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that wouldn't actually translate directly into the pier is 75% complete.
And some of those materials, for instance, like the concrete cord slabs that go out on the pier, we don't have enough storage area, lay down area at the pier to be able to store all of that material. So a lot of this stuff could be stored off site, and we have document pictures, all of that information for what's stored off site.
So I just brought up the this month's pay application. So how it's done is it's on an AIA form, which is it's an approximation, but every line item is broken out and it's built on percent complete. So by coincidence, looking at the bottom, it'll tell you percent complete based on billables. It's 75.51%.
Well, that answered that question.
That's this month, huh?
Yes.
That's this month.
Mhm.
So, just about through all my questions. But so we're talking at the end of, we're expecting this to be completed either the December 15th to February 15th. And I know you guys are working hard to actually shorten that up. So the final couple questions that I have is, number one, is there anything out there that you think might possibly slow these dates up, and is there anything we can do about it before we get to that? So we'll
You go ahead, John.
I think, we have a handful of things, small items like, the siding, the surf diner, a couple things that we need to nail down. I think that could probably be done in a few days. So outside of those items, which do have time impacts, I don't see anything major. We are aware when we get out into the ocean, which is it's a contractor under us, that on the trestle, when they got out to the last 2 to 4 piles, it was deeper, so they had to weld on. So every pile that has been driven so far on the permanent structure and the sleeve has worked, and it's performed and it's tested out. So that's a positive thing. So I think we're at 8. So we have 8. There's a total of 13 pile bents. So one combination is a pile bent. There's 13. Yeah. So in the last 2 to 4, there's a potential that we may have deeper piles again. We just don't know, because until you get underground. So, until you get into the ocean. So that's probably it.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to what John said, so when they were driving the trestle bents, so the trestle is the temporary structure that is next to the pier. When they were driving the piles for bents 7 and 8, they had an assumption for the pile length that was going to be required. Well, they didn't meet refusal when they were driving that pile. So they had to lengthen those piles and then drive deeper to be able to get the resistance that the piles had to meet. So that is the thing that's kind of out there still, is now that the pier is progressing, the pier piles are progressing near that point, that far away from the beach, it's likely that they're going to experience similar geotechnical conditions that will have to be addressed.
So in layman, they do testing before. They know where, when you get below the mud line, where what we call the hard material is. The problem is when you get underground is there's different types of hard material. So it's been consistent all the way out. When you get out to the last 2 to 4, that material is softer for maybe 25 feet, and then it gets like granite. So basically that's what he's describing. So to get refusal, which is how it's designed for capacity, you have to get into that hard rock. So there's been an adjustment in the field, which did work on the trestles. But it is a longer pile. It has to go deeper, and it has to get into rock that's very, very hard.
Do y'all see anything that might drastically increase the cost of what we're doing? And we only have I'm asking that, we have a limited amount of money. We think the state has looked after us this year again, but and until that happens, I'm basing everything on what I got in the bank today. So do you see anything that we need to be worried about or working on now that could increase the cost?
Yeah, I mean, there's, any additional change modifications. I mean, we're waiting on the decision for the parking lot, which is added scope. Anything that has to be done on those last piles, that would be a pass-through cost from the marine contractor. I don't know, the magnitude of that yet. And then any, owner options. I mean, so can't really answer that question. I could say from afar, analyzing a construction project of this magnitude, we're actually doing amazing, because the original contract was we took a deduct what we couldn't do, and then there was some value engineering process. So with all the improvements on the building, some of the ones the architects have done, the siding, the podium, the redesign of the pier itself, we're probably within 1 or 2% of the base bid price. So, on a project this size, if you bring it in within 10%, 5 to 10% of the bid price, I think that's a success, and I don't see any projections further than that.
I'm gonna give you guys, each of the groups here, give you the opportunity, if you'd like to say anything about the process of the pier right now before I open it up to questions from the council. Is anything you would like us to know that we don't know? So if we don't know it, they don't want you to know, guys. Simple as that.
Well, I mean, like like Bill said, I mean, we do have a weekly conference call every Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And I mean, Bill's fully aware of everything going on. Therefore, the town's aware. So that's my answer.
There you go. And they do get minutes, so they do know too. I'm gonna, because of course this belongs to y'all for the town, because the town elected y'all.
I'd like to hear from
Yeah, what do
project
y'all
manager.
think, gentlemen?
They're the independent people. So
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from them.
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot. So, I mean, honestly, as Bill mentioned earlier, we were brought on in April, I think, timeframe to try to help the process out. And, a lot of that time spent in April was with these guys, just trying to figure out what the issues were. And we spent a day with them, and then following up with the design team to try to see if we couldn't chase down some of the answers to those issues, or try to push things along. And I mean, I hope that we were effective in doing that early on. I mean, here lately, it's mainly just been about staying in communication with both parties and making sure that answers are getting to where they need to be. And, there's no lingering open RFIs or submittals or delays or anything like that. So we're just sort of here trying to keep abreast of everything and advising Bill on anything that we see that might be a potential issue for him. I don't know any other way to answer it other than just trying to keep our finger on the pulse of the project.
And I did get a report yesterday off of that. I'll be forwarding to you all today.
Yeah, and just to add to what Kelly said, in the absence of a project manager, I feel like their involvement has been helpful ever since they've come in the picture.
I mean, I appreciate you saying that, and understand we can't really legally direct them to do anything, and we can't direct them to do anything. We're just here trying to be in an advisory role to both parties as well as to the town to try to keep the ship moving in the right direction. So.
And they have helped.
Okay, well, I'm going to open it up from questions from council. Let's start with Mr. Stamey.
Hi, guys. Glad y'all here. Glad you presented what you have. I do have a few questions. And it goes to when you got the bid for this pier and you put a price on it, why didn't these panels or hardy planks and roof and all that be ordered at that time? Why wait 16 months or 15 months to order stuff? why wasn't it ordered in and put on a lay down lot somewhere? You have two here in town. You have the one that y'all have, and then you have the pier parking lot laid out. My question is, why has it been put off over the past 18 months that we're getting down, or not 18 months, 12 months, say, from not ordering them the panels and the roof and stuff? Why is that? Why was that not? Why has it been waited on to get it to the job sites?
That's a very good question. And I have the answer. Okay. So in the beginning of the project, until they knew certain grants and we worked certain things out, it was a major concern for us to do something called a value engineering exercise. So the siding actually was presented as a credit. So using just switching manufacturers to a very well-known, which would be Hardy. So they had a commercial. And when we talk about siding, you have to also take in consideration, this was not regular Hardy siding that you see in every house. It was a very specific cementitious siding product for commercial. So there's one factory in the country that makes it for each manufacturer. So we gave a credit, and I think it was somewhere in the $30,000 range.
21,000.
It was $20,000 credit, and it was probably equal or superior product. And unfortunately, with the whole town council process or whatever, we have another requirement, which is called a submittal requirement. So we can't order until the architects and engineers get the submittal, they review it, and they approve it, because we'd be doing that at risk. So somewhere in the process, with meetings and maybe COVID or whatever, it wasn't approved. Once we approved it, when we called the factory, we started getting the COVID shutdowns. So that factory, Hardy, shut down that plant. Then the architects and engineers, we started working to go to Boral. That factory shut down. We tried to go back to Hardy, which we were able to, but we could not get a feeling of comfort that they would actually meet the timeline that we got with this other product. So this other product was found by some of our suppliers, presented and analyzed by the architect and the engineer, and it's a good product. It's PVC. It's like 180 or 190 mile per hour wind. And we called all the factories, all the manufacturers in the country, and they guaranteed delivery, which they met 2 weeks early. So that is a great question. And from the outside, it would seem a certain way, but the actual process is how I described. It was a combination of delays and then factory shutdowns. So we're actually very fortunate to actually have siding that can meet close to the design intent, because it's not a residential siding. I mean, this one is geared towards it, but it's 100 and, like I said, I think it's 180 or 190 mile per hour wind load.
And part of that delay wasn't a submittal so much as we submitted the updated pricing for that Hardy substitution in, I believe, July. And I don't think we were given the actual verbal direction to go that way, but I don't think the actual change request signature got issued until like December. So there's a 5-month lull with a signature giving us that direction.
Okay, one more question. This more to the town than it is to y'all guys. With Surf Diner, as a council, we set a deadline for them to have their proposal in for whatever they needed to put in that building. Why are we still receiving change orders from Surf Diner that these guys has been held up on? Why hadn't they submitted their proposal and we cut that off? Why do we keep changing?
I'm under the impression that they did, and we sent a plan off, right? In June, was it?
Yeah, I would say that they submitted what they needed to submit. And then we as a design team in town, kind of internalized those changes and said, yeah, we'd like to entertain this one, or we don't want to entertain that one. And so then we took those changes and then presented it to the contractor. So then the contractor's been pricing that out. And so that's where it is right now is they've got it held up on, the framer, because there are modifications to the exterior in some of the changes. But outside of that, I think they've got their package together and are about ready to submit. what those changes would cost and entail.
And it's not one of those things. It's, you know, it takes them a while to figure it out, and takes them a while. I wish it was something you could just say, oh, we just place it in, but you can't.
Well, that I can probably explain it in a way everybody can understand. So the lease that was signed many moons ago. Okay, when you sign a lease, typically an attorney writes the deliverables or the magnitude and the scope, and it's in words. So it may be a certain handrail, certain size window, and all that's fine. So what we do is we give a magnitude of price so you can understand it. But the process is more complicated because then it has to be designed. So the surf diner hired an outside firm, which is very qualified. So when you have window, you're going to change a handrail or whatever, it still needs to be designed. So they have to design it. So for instance, if surf diner wants to put a bathroom over here, we can all say, okay, we're going to put a bathroom over there. But then it has to be designed by an architect and engineer coordinated with the design architect and engineer, and you have to run the piping and you have to run the hot water, you have to core the slab. So that process is more than just, delivering 10 items that are in the surf diner's lease. And that's the process that had to take place.
And just so that everyone's aware, the work related to the surf diner was not in the original contract. That's not something that came onto the table until I believe construction had already commenced.
Right.
So this is something that both Consensus and the design team has worked into their workload with this project to help get completed.
Yeah, and one example of that is the railing that's been mentioned. was written into the lease with Surf Diner, but not part of the original project scope. So the original project scope had one item in there. The lease had a different one. So that one is outstanding right now, and that's something that the design team, specifically me, is reviewing and going over to present to the contractor, but that's not in the pricing that the Surf Diner would be responsible for.
And just to touch on, the surf diner is the only one that there was a lease. If we don't learn from this process, you're going to go through it on every single space. So not using the design team and the contract, you can gain, but you still have to design these spaces.
Yeah. So the surf diner had engaged PMH out of Myrtle Beach, an architect. It didn't go through LS3P. They had their own architect that then we've had to coordinate with as the discussions went on.
Another question, gentlemen. We eliminated somehow or another, I don't know how it got done, but we eliminated the handrails going up the main flight of stairs here. We done that undoubtedly at the beginning of this processing, right? So why wasn't something done at that time to replace the hand railings instead of waiting to now to come up with this idea of how we're going to get handrails? You know, the builders know, the architects know that we got to have handrails. Why wasn't that discussed or done way back yonder? Why wasn't that done then instead of waiting to now to get it done? It seems like the last time every time I hear something, we working on handrails to go to the building. And that shouldn't be, in my opinion, I don't know about y'all's, but in my opinion, we know them handrails has got to be there. Why wasn't they there? Why didn't the design team, work on that earlier to get it done instead of waiting to now to do it? Can you?
I can comment on that. Initially, it wasn't actually known that the handrails were not in the project completely. When the value engineering came through, it didn't have documentation that fully showed. It said as a line item that the lighted handrails had been removed, but it was understood by the design team that it was the lighting in the handrails, not the actual handrails. Because whenever you take something out, you've got to put something back in, and that's a code item that needs to be in the project, right? So we didn't initially actually realize that when that was taken out, it was taken out in 100%. We thought the handrails were still in the project, but the lighting component had been removed. So usually when there's a VE process, that there's a component in there that's a replacement of whatever it is that's a cheaper version. So that's another item where the design team's taken it upon our own shoulders to look at reviewing the handrail and determine a solution for that outside of our own normal scope. So we are reviewing that. And first thing we wanted to figure out was, all right, so if the lighting component has been removed from that, what's the solution for that? Because initially the VE solution for the lighting was deemed that it wouldn't actually work for the project. So it didn't meet all the project requirements and actually didn't have locations to be mounted because it was only a step light. So when the lighting component was taken out, it was put back with a step light that could have never worked anyway upon further review. And so we wanted to figure out the lighting component. So we figured out a lighting solution to that. The best solution we've already provided, which was in the construction documents. But there are many other project requirements being near the beach and just the lighting in general that we had to resolve before we presented a new solution that wasn't even in our scope. So that's additional scope that we haven't actually even, charged for. So we are working through that, but initially it wasn't understood that the entirety of the railing through a VE process would generate 0 railings. That's not very common.
So in other words, that's going to be an increased cost to the town to go back and redesign hand railings and all that undoubtedly somebody deleted. So the town's going to have to pay for that, even though at the scope of the work, we had lighted handrails
Correct.
when they bid on it. I'm assuming. 'Cause I don't have the.
So the design team's actually taken that charge. We are looking into the handrails, but we're not charging you extra to provide a second solution.
I mean, so to answer that question is yes, there was in the VE process, a lot of times you start looking for ideas. So the electrical contractor, which is Melton Electric, is probably one of the most qualified commercial. He did throw out some ideas, and there was a list of, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 items. Out of all of the items, that one there probably wasn't, it didn't function exactly the way they anticipated. And it's not because they didn't have good ideas. It's because it's not the handrail, the complexity, it's the light. There's certain requirements for the light. So it's the combination. But you have to remember as well is the last council or the last administrator or whatever, everything was budget. So, I mean, there was a $1.5 million deduct taken out of the contract initially that couldn't be done. So when you're saying the bid price was here and the awarded contract was several $1 million less. So when you take things out, yes, you have to add back in. But to give the perspective that I gave before is with all these adds and changes and improvements, we're right around the original bid price. So there will be some increases, but it's not like that the town didn't get value because the process of putting back the piles from the deduct, which was a disaster, it would have disqualified the funding from the federal government altogether. And it was caught by our team, the architects, the engineers, and worked through where you're getting 75% of the funding. That cost to put back in was relatively somewhere around $3 million at that point. At the end of the day, they got the pile system that's in there with the building and everything for $1.3 million. So when we, like anything, when you value what you get for a project and you say, okay, this costs extra, this was less, you have to look at the whole pot. So that particular item, yes, will be an increase, but you have to give some credit to some of the other items that were in the town's favor.
Thanks. Thank y'all.
Mr. Holder.
We've talked about having power at the end of the pier. Where are we now to get enough power, like if you want to have, if somebody wants to have a concert or something out on the end of the pier, we can do it.
Yeah, we've been working with our electrical engineer, RMF, to provide a recommendation, which we'll be getting out. Initially how it all began is we started probing the town and how much power do you want? And So there was, we went through that process, and there were quite a few different opinions, and they ended up, I think, going to Folly Beach and checking out their pier. And there might have been a misunderstanding when they went to Folly Beach, as I think the town was told that they had 400 amps. And Collins Engineers is actually working.
Well, the project manager for the Folly Beach Pier project is one of my clients. He works for Charleston County Parks and Recreation.
So they were able to actually get a hand on the drawings for the Folly Beach Pier, and it turned out that they actually only had 40 amps at the end of the pier. So there was confusion, and is confusion, on how much power is needed versus what's being provided. That's an additional scope again to the pier. We have power at the end of the pier, but at that time when we were in the design, it was not. It was discussed, but it was not determined that we needed as much power as is being requested now.
How much power was originally out there?
Right now, you just have general outlets from the buildings all the way out to the pier and the pier head. So those are just general service outlets, but we're looking at providing the recommendation to the town to increase that load based on available capacity within the current panels. And so just to be, for comparison's sake, a 400 amp panel is the size of the panel that's going to be powering building A for the Surf Diner. So they're going to run a full restaurant, interior space, kitchen, all that off of a 400 amp panel.
Yes.
So 400 amp is too
It's
much.
a lot.
And the amount of money that it would take to get that power down there over voltage drop is going to be something that you're going to get the price at the end and then probably not want to entertain. So we are looking to give a lesser amperage. It's probably going to be more around 100 amps based on actual use that would be down there, but we'll get that to the town.
And basically, that's what they were told. This is what we're going to do down there, concerts and those type of things. And we also wanted to make sure that in the future, if we decided to grow down there, if the rules change and we could build something, that we were ready for it. So that's what they're looking at.
Okay. Next thing was, we've heard for the last year handrails. And it all goes, this Lottie handrail, it's always talked about for over a year. When are we going to be done talking about handrails? Because it gets old,
I could speak on that. We've taken that baton for once the VE was provided, and then we reviewed their lighting solution, or the electrical engineer reviewed the lighting solution. It was determined that original solution wouldn't be adequate. It wouldn't work. And so the contractor went through a process over last year, trying to work with Melton and the lighting rep to provide a solution that would work in that. And towards the end of last year, they decided that they couldn't take it any further. So, or maybe at the beginning of the year. And so we took that baton under our scope as, again, not charging the town more money. But that's when we started looking at the alternate lighting possibilities. And, one was re-entertaining, putting it back into the project just as it was. But then we're also looking at other items so that that would be cost savings, because we knew we didn't want to put that back in where everybody was already understanding that it was taken out. So it was the superior, I think, product for the pier, and would have been a great installation. But we've looked at alternate means. We've now are at the end of figuring out how to attach that. We've got the system. And so we're almost to the point where we're going to provide that to the contractor. But again, that was something that was initially provided. Contractor took their run at it, and then we ended up taking it from them and taking it over to provide a solution for the town.
It's taken a long time.
Agreed.
Okay.
Ms. Keating says she doesn't have anything.
I
guess I don't have anything. I would just like to say that value engineering seems to have cost us some time in this issue. Other than that, it also seems like it has probably ended up with a better peer. So I guess it's better to wait a little longer if it's a better peer. But that's all I really have. I don't have any questions.
Mr. Kinkin.
You mentioned that at the end of the pier, the last couple of runs may have to go deeper. Does that mean you have to wait, see how deep you go, and then order the concrete sleeves? Or does the concrete sleeves you have order work and they just don't go as deep as a steel pier sleeves?
So it's basically the design on the piles, the ocean piles, is basically, I call it a composite. So it's two-part. You have a triple coated steel pile that goes in first, and then the concrete sleeve is also structural, but it's a lot for aesthetics and protecting it. So the depth would be on the steel because that's underneath the mud line. So in theory, the concrete sleeve would be unaffected.
Okay.
Because that only goes down into the sand where the pile has to go, 30, 40 feet below the mud line. So that would be the length. And what they were able to do before, which we got to figure out, they were able to weld it in place and change the driving, the hammer to get it into the rock, and it did work. And that's how it has to be done. So contrary to what a lot of people believe is you have a vibratory hammer and an impact hammer. One thinks one's superior or stronger to the other. That's not the case. There's dynamics. So in this particular application, a vibratory hammer is able to get that steel pile into this rock that's very, very, very hard, like granite, and it worked. And it got refusal, resistance, and capacity. So you have a design team here, but you also have engineers that are working for us that are not here, and between the two contractors and two design teams, I mean, there's a lot of planning. But, like I keep saying is the positive thing is it's a complicated structure. Everything has worked. Everything has worked, which is, we might have to retweak it, redesign something, do something, but everything's functionally working, which, is a positive thing. Yeah.
One of my concerns all along has been the fact that we haven't dried the buildings in. And every construction job I've seen, whether it be commercial or residential, that was one of the major first steps, is get the side up, get it protected, get the roof on, get it complete. Windows in, keep the weather from being in there. Did you use stainless steel screws on putting the building together?
Yes. It's all stainless steel.
Good, because that keeps them from rust. If the interior handrails have been approved, have they been ordered?
No, because we're still constructing the actual interior stairs. We're up to the podium slab, so from ground level up to podium slab yet. We've got to continue up to the attic. Once we finish the stairs, then it can be field measured.
Okay.
And there's a process to that. So once it's field measured, our handrail subcontractor will do what's called a shop drawing showing these. We have to present it to the design team for approval.
Yeah, just so everybody understands. So we talk about handrails, you could break it into two sections. So basically you have inside the stair towers, which is a basic steel, and then the handrails outside would consist of the monument stairs, the ramp, and then some of the exterior. That's what they were talking about. That was a lighted system. So there's two different ones. And then there has been a lot of delay and talk with the handrails, but if anytime you build a stadium or a hotel or whatever, the handrails are one of the last things to get done, because you can't order handrails and just put them on stairs, because that's an amateur mistake, because the stairs, the ramps, they've all been changed a little bit, the rise, the run, the landings, they have to be field measured and customized. So the only thing that's affecting us is ordering it and locking in the price, because steel and aluminum have gone up 300-400% since the beginning of the project. So that's another thing, is If they had an unlimited budget, they could design anything in the world that would be great, but they're also trying to work within, limits of budget. So that's a challenge we're all dealing with.
Uh, how do you what I read about the product you're putting on the siding, mounts on a rail. Is that correct?
That's actually the siding.
No, it does not mount on a rail.
Well,
There's a bracket that goes between each butt joints of the siding that gets screwed in, correct?
Okay, and it has to be a gap between that and the building. Is that correct? It can't be just screwed all the way into the building and not have the gap.
There's not a gap in between the siding and the weather barrier. There's a small little gap, so the screw does not fasten tight to the actual siding product itself.
So how are you going to manage that?
Field quality assurance.
We've in bringing on this third siding product that's been introduced to the project, we've asked that the manufacturer have a rep on site as part of as this product has been discussed. They have a program called First Nail Support, so they send a technical rep out from their own side, and they'll be on site with Consensus's subcontractor as they begin the installation of it to make sure that all the installation procedures are adhered to. I think the item that you're talking about is that this product, if you read the insulation material, it within one run of siding, it thermally contracts, and so at the end you have a J channel and a J channel, and it's allowed to thermally contract in and out of that pocket without coming out. And so if it's a length of a specific run, they have you within that whole length from end to end, secure it in the middle tightly. And then everywhere else in the documentation on that run, they say to secure it with a minimum of 130 or 1/32 of an inch tightness. So basically, don't fully tighten it is what that means in the field, so that product can expand and contract from the middle within those two channels at the end.
But I thought I read that it said that you could only have a run so long, and our runs are going to be longer than that.
Yeah, we're in the process of determining that clarification right now with the manufacturer. And for the most part, that doesn't affect anything on the pier. It's only the outermost walls, and we're just that's one item as we've gone through this pre-con that we're clarifying with the manufacturer right now.
Yeah, so there'll be a break, and it's similar to like when you see, brick, you'll have an expansion joint, 40 feet, drywall and medical, it's the same thing. So they have that built into the engineering of the system. There'll be a system for expansion, and it goes one way, so you don't have buckling.
Yeah, and that's one of the main differences between this product versus the other two that were reviewed, the original one or the Hardy product. Those products are just secured panel by panel, and then the seams are caulked, where this product does not have any caulk between each piece of siding. They're actually rigidly attached with a bracket as tight as they can without any caulk in between each piece of siding. So that's why they're all acting in one as one piece, or a floating system, a row as they call it, to expand and contract.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Drake.
I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out today. Thank y'all guys, and thank y'all both over there for what you've put into this. I think we're down to just a few things: the power, the railing, and the siding. And it sounds like y'all got that under control. So just keep working forward, keep getting a good job done for the town, and that's about it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more question for you.
You have.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Gentlemen, I'd like to know, I know you started out earlier that you don't have a completion date, but I'd like to know from Consensus and Collins where you stand on your product, where you're at this time, and do you think the buildings and everything is on target for what they're doing? If you get what I'm saying, do you think that right now the project's where it ought to be, and do you think is the product where it should be? Are y'all comfortable with your deadline of December or February to get this done, do you think it's capable of getting there? Or are we going to have some more problems as we goes?
There's, I mean, believe us, the biggest cost of time goes on the contractor, and I mean, because we're local and because this is such a project at our heart. I mean, we're not adversarial with this town at all. This is a monument project. I mean, we like every single person on the design team. But let's be honest, the time and the money is costing the contractor the most amount of money, and it's big. So the answer to that question is we have the siding here. So we don't know, and they're doing a very good job trying to figure out what is the best piece, but we cannot start deciding until we make a decision on the trim piece, and then we have to order it. So we can't tell you that answer until we know when we get the answer for the siding. It might be a day. It might have to go through council. If it goes through council for a month, that's going to delay the project 60 days. If we get it today, Matt can make a call. So it really is a team effort. We all have to understand that there are decisions to be made, but you can't get a guaranteed feeling of time until you can give us a guaranteed feeling of selection.
That is one of those that would be my decision. As soon as I get it, we'll move that pretty quickly.
Okay. So as Collins engineer, do y'all think this project's on it where it should be, or do you think it's behind time of what it should be? Because y'all are the sort of the next to the final word. You ain't the final word, but y'all make a lot of decisions on what they do. So do you feel like that it's where it ought to be, or something happening between them and y'all that's holding up this project that we need to address today? Or is there something that this council needs to do to get it straightened out, to get it done? That's where I'm at. It seems like every time I turn around, we're hearing problems after problems and delays of maybe on their part, maybe on your part. But what do we do to get it to where it's moving slowly and they're on their 75% rate to get this done? Is it something y'all need to do, or is it something they need to do, or is it something we need to do?
I feel like where this project is at right now, and you can let me know if you agree. I mean, I think that consensus in the design team has worked through a lot of unforeseen conditions that have come up. We've had a good relationship solving those, and we've been communicative about that. I wouldn't say at this point there's anything that I can pinpoint, like, yes, this has to change today. Like the councilman said a minute ago, like there's just a little bit of low-hanging fruit left, honestly. Smaller items that have to get finalized here that are honestly close to getting finalized. And like we said earlier, the only unknown right now is the driving of the piles at the pier as it goes up. So that how the schedule actually gets impacted is going to have to be determined at that point.
I mean, a perfect example, and I'll just ask for your opinion, is if we were working for a big corporate billion-dollar company that just cared about the bottom line and not, we could have those storefront windows in on the appearance and everybody be happy, building be dried in, but it would be irresponsible because we have to change the openings. We'd have to tear them all out. And then you wouldn't be saying, hey, we should have been started 4 weeks ago. You would say, how irresponsible of a contractor was that? And that's a situation we have. So it's not good for us because we don't have we have to probably going to have to board the windows up, but we have the storefront. So, I mean, we don't have an active change order to modify the window openings in all these buildings right now. So we don't have no obligation to do it, but we know it's going to be done. So we're working to get the town so they're not in a huge fight with their tenants. Because if the tenant had to come in and tear the building apart after the siding was up, it'd be a problem. So we're just asking, I mean, what would you like us to do? We're trying to be the best, mindful contractor we can, but we cannot put the windows in without the openings changed.
Personally, I'd like to see the buildings put up and done like it was supposed to be done to start with, not giving people chances to change things. That's the way I'd be, but that's my opinion of it. It ain't the way it maybe should be done, but we've give you a contract to do a building. We didn't give you a contract to keep changing things on that building. And then we've give them a deadline to get that project in or that change order in. They should have had that done. We shouldn't be giving them more chances to change it. We should go ahead and do what the plans are, not just keep waiting on the change order.
I don't know if you're talking about Surf Diner, but there hasn't been anything with Surf Diner that's held up the storefront submittal.
From what I hear, it is. From what they tell us, it is.
Oh, we can't put the windows in.
Yeah, I don't. Surf Diner has not held up the storefront submittal to my knowledge. There are windows within the Surf Diner's modification that are different in several openings, but those openings are not bigger, so they don't change the opening size in a larger size. They're smaller within those openings, so they can still fit within those openings. But those windows and those openings were not in the storefront submittal that's been reviewed and approved.
John came in the other day, 2 weeks ago and told us that the reason that they were delayed is because of change orders being done by Surf Diner. The change orders is still pending on Surf Diner on things like 2 weeks ago he stood right here and told us that, and here you're telling me today that ain't true.
They're reviewing the changes for the Surf Diner, and as we mentioned, are on the cusp of compiling that in totality. So there's no active change request out there for the Surf Diner currently.
Is that not what you told us 2 weeks ago?
Well, I think you have to understand the word he said. There's no active change request, so that means that's exactly what I said. We don't have an active change directing us to modify the building signed, but we're all dealt with a deck of cards of the Surf Diner lease that has requirements. So we all know this work needs to be done. We've been talking about it for a year. So he's right. It's not an active, but it's forthcoming. So the storefront, and he's also correct, the storefront submittal, they have the storefront in the shop, but you can't manufacture storefront windows until you take what's called a rough opening. If you've ever seen that before, that's when you have these big gaps. So you're not incorrect, but there's two parts to that. So there is not an active change order. We're moving towards that, and that'll probably be within the next week.
Yeah, there would be an active change request once they have their pricing completely compiled, which is right. We're on the cusp of.
I mean,
okay. I just basically have two questions. The first one is that everybody here works for the town of Surfside Beach on our contract. Okay. Nobody here works for the Surf Diner or any of the other people that are coming there. So basically, we're interested in our contract, and I hear that you guys have looked at some of the stuff that Surf Diner has gotten their own engineer, okay, and redesigned some of the stuff, and then they've had to put it over to you to get approval of it, right?
Well, yeah, any of the changes to the building envelope that the Surf Diner has proposed, we've internally reviewed with the town, and then from that review, we provided that to consensus so that they could then get pricing for it.
Okay, my question to this is that the work that you've done and Collins has done and consensus has done on the Surf Diner, are you keeping that separate so that we can charge Surf Diner for it? Because Surf Diner doesn't, Surf Diner is in charge of their own modifications. We shouldn't be paying for modifications to their restaurant.
Yes.
I asked him to do that
a long time ago.
Well, that's what I mean. Our lease with them gives them a certain amount of money and this and that and the other thing. And I want to make sure that we're not paying for services that they should be paying for. Because like any of the other tenants, they're going to get a box and they're going to have to pay to have the modifications done to make it into their own individual spaces. Okay. The last thing is, I'd like to hear a little bit from Littner on what you guys have done, just for the fact that, I mean, we hired you guys to sort of like be the mediator and be our eyes on this to see what's going on. And I want to know what you feel about the whole process.
Careful what I say here. Again, coming on, it's always difficult. You coming into a project that's 14, 16 months into it, and then, we spent quite a bit of time just getting caught up as to where they were, what the issues were. I mean, to echo both sentiments, and I think they are progressing as well as they could be. Are there some things that could have gone better? Yes. But anytime you introduce VE, right, that introduces a whole different animal, and that's what's happened here. And so that's certainly caused some issues that everybody's working through as a team to try to get those issues resolved. VE, value engineering, is what the terminology is, and it's where you present options, usually deducts or credits to a project to try to save money. And so, anytime you go through that exercise, which is a good exercise, we do it on a lot of our projects, a lot of larger projects, and it's a good thing. But it also has its difficulties if you don't manage them properly. And I think here there were some VE options that opened Pandora's box and created some problems. But I think, again, everybody's working through them, and I think they're at the end of the tunnel. Now we just got to get over the hump and finish it. So
I think the word would be unintended consequences of some of these things. And it's not, everybody it's better for them to get off the job and be finished. It's better for their bottom line to be finished. Nobody wants to extend the project, but in delivering this, I would say not most of our projects, but every one of our projects, we're involved at every milestone, looking at trying to be, and I wouldn't use the word cheaper, but more cost effective. And the term, there's multiple ways of skinning the cat. The pile system was redesigned. And there's multiple ways of doing a pile system, and the town realized a significant cost avoidance. I wouldn't call it savings, cost avoidance due to that. And so we've been able to remove. I think that the handrail is very unique. But let's face it, this is a one. This pier has never been built in the world before. It's the only time this one, the circumstances of the design and the site, it's super unique and super it's very unique. So the lighting system was the handrail system was integral. When it was value engineered out, I think that was just a human error in communication that they didn't hear from the subcontractor. So and I think it's just I think that was an error. But overall, we feel that the communication is the most important thing of any project, and working together. And I think that's, as long as that remains, I think the project will continue to be successful.
And Mr. Mayor, I throw in a couple of comments on that, sir.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Again, I just received the second or third report, whichever it is that you'll get today. But the areas that they've been working on is, number one, documentation, making sure the documentation that's supposed to go where it's supposed to go is received by whoever's supposed to receive it. It's responded to. Whether it's a request for information, whether it's a request for time for weather, whether it's a delay notice, they're making sure that they're being responded to and answered to as per our contract to make sure everyone's doing it right. They were also looking at construction items or issues. They talked about, they reviewed the interior handrails, the lighted handrails, the handrail posts, the surf diner, ADA ramp stuff. They've gone through that. They've also identified critical items that we need to make sure we look at. One of them being the construction schedules, because if there's time at the end, someone's responsible for that time. So we're making sure we're on top of that. And they've also looked at delay notices and making sure that Consensus get the responses that they need, but then making sure Consensus responds back to the design team the way they need. Not saying that there's big issues there, but they're watching that. And so those are some of the things that they're doing for us that's going to help us in the future and help keep this thing on project. And everybody in here has actually told me that they're glad that they're there and helping with these things.
Okay. And with that, any closing statements from LS3P?
Well, I just like to say that we're happy to be involved in this project, as we were from day one. And, we're really excited for it. And, we've definitely got an invested effort into this too. So we're proud to be on it and proud to get it to the end.
Thank you. Collins?
Yeah, and just to add what Troy said, Beach, Troy, and myself, we've been here since the beginning, ever since the pier was damaged. It's been an amazing process to be involved in this amazing project. And every decision we make, we essentially act as an extension of the town. So every decision we make has your best interest in mind, and that's what we're going to keep doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Linda?
Nothing more than what I said earlier. We're glad to be a part of the team as well. I would have liked to have been involved early on to think we could have headed off some of this stuff earlier, but be that as it may, I think we're close. I think we're towards the end of it, and I hope we can get this thing resolved before the end of the year, and I think we can. So just
all right, thank you. And Consensus?
We're also very proud to be involved in this project. It's an amazing project, and I think with some of these decisions, siding, things like that, it's going to look what the town wants to see, because you have a sided building. When you're doing underground work, you don't really see the product. So we hope in the next 2 weeks or whatever, you start seeing a finished product. So get the siding, handrails, and parking lot decided, we can start moving towards completion.
Yeah. And can I say one last thing, sir?
Yes, you can. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. Yeah. Just so I want our citizens to know, if you don't see these guys on the pier and it's not raining or a thunderstorm, what they probably are is underground, doing stuff underground or in the buildings. I go out there almost every day. I get in John's way all the time. Tells me to get off the area, but they're out there and they're doing a job. The difference is when John has his crane that can lift up 500,000 tons, you don't need 500,000 people out there lifting it up, because he's got equipment that does it. But our guys are out there and they're working, and that's just the truth.
All right, I want to thank everybody for coming today. And I think that, bringing this in and asking these questions, that the residents and everybody gets a better understanding of where we are and where we stand. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a statement. I know that y'all are not going to get, the audience or the people that's involved is not going to get to make comments today, but there are a workshop tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Is that not right?
Yes,
6
sir.
o'clock tomorrow afternoon. If any resident has any problems with what's going on today, please be here tomorrow and speak up. Let us know. Let us know what y'all thinking, because in the long run, y'all are the town, and that's what we need. I'm saying that. Thanks, guys. Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Okay. So, like he said, tomorrow afternoon at 6 o'clock, anybody that wants to come to the citizen workshop is free to do that. And with that, I need a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
Hope we